Hi and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. It is Science Fiction Saturday again, and I've got two incredibly different science fiction films, both of which are each in their own way mad as hell. The first one is from 2018, and it's a rarity. I don't even know if it's science fiction. It could be just an art piece. It may be science fiction. It's definitely body horror, and it's really a weird piece of film called The Foaming Node. It's an Australian one, and it blew my mind when I saw it. And then, just to cleanse my palate, I went back to 1968 for a Tygon film with Peter Cushing in it called The Blood Beast Terror, which is just as crazy but in a very, very different way. So let's get started with The Foaming Node. This one runs about an hour, and it's directed by and written and edited by a guy called Ian Haig. It's showed at a couple of small film festivals, and it is available for sale online. I'll post a link to where that is. But I'm still confused. Is it an art house piece? Is it science fiction or horror? What the hell is it? I've got a little bit of a précis of what it is. I'm going to give you that verbatim, and then I'm going to talk to you about what I saw in the movie, what I felt about the movie. According to the link I've got here, The Foaming Node essays the discovery and emergence of new bodily organs in meticulous and captivating detail. We follow the last remaining observers, members of a cult, who have experienced both the transmissions of the foaming node and their own personal and strange bodily transformations. They discuss exactly how the changes associated with the foaming node have affected them. They tell fascinating, visceral, detailed tales that reach beyond science, alternative medicine, or corporeality. The closest thing I could think of to call it is really a little bit of Cronenberg mixed in with
just weirdness.
It really is a madly challenging film. Now, I've got some notes I've got to read through because I want to get my feelings about this one exactly right. It's basically a bunch of talking heads and cross-cuts to the foaming node itself, which is a comatose man who is foaming at the mouth, and somehow that foam in his mouth is transmitted through a video feed to other people, and it becomes contagious. Like the Ring movies, the thing is transmitted via video imagery, and that causes certain artifacts in the video imagery we see of the interviews with the people who call themselves observers, who have become part of the foaming node. We see things they call video holes.
It wasn't long until the video holes appeared. At first they were thought to be completely random. However, it was soon realized that anywhere there was a screen of some sort, the video holes made a brief appearance.
Which are patches of the video showing the interviews with these people, which suddenly turns into a kind of fleshy hole in the image of these people. And then we get more complex visual effects where the faces of those being interviewed are changed by something in the foaming node as they talk about how the foaming node has encouraged them and demanded that they incorporate DNA from other people and other species into their own via various means. It's a head trip of a movie, and the low-res graphics, which are deliberately used at low resolution, kind of emphasize that the foaming node spreads not through physical contact but through video images. And the repetition of the phrase "the foaming node" makes it hypnotic and rhythmic and it's just oddly strange. And as the images start distorting, you get the impression that something non-human is interfering with those images that we're watching, and that something is trying to reach us as an audience through those video images. Now, the deadpan acting of the observers is really creepy as well. The images of them start out as more or less normal talking head images, though there are a couple of observers who don't speak. But when they do, they start talking about the excretions of the foaming node. And by that, they mean the foam that comes out of the foaming node. And we see various crosscuts of the observers playing with the foam in their hands, and we don't even know how they got hold of the foam. Now, there are lots of video manipulations in this. There are repeated moments giving the impression that maybe the foaming node is also manipulating time as well as the images. And the hypnotic repetition of the phrase "the foaming node" makes the video incredibly watchable and hypnotic. You will want to find out the next transgressive thing that these people are going to say about it. It becomes like a mantra for them, and we learn gradually that things are spreading physically. There become two more foaming nodes, one a woman and another one a child, who also become part of this gestalt of something that can't be expressed in human terms. And to make things even stranger and weirder, the video cuts out into video feeds of various products, mobile phones and computer systems and things like that. And it gives the impression that the foaming node is reaching out to find out what our technologies are and to manipulate them in order to manipulate the human race. It's not explicitly stated, but if you watch these video clips, which are shown in high resolution and in fairly tight close-up, we get to understand that a lot of the ways we talk about technology are as abstract and as oblique and as weird as the people talking about the foaming node. It kind of challenges our ideas of technology and our ideas of what video is used for by ourselves and by businesses. And how is that any stranger in its own way than these cultists talking about this phenomenon which is being transmitted to them through a video feed? This video is not going to be for everybody. It's going to be for the people who like their science fiction right out on the edge, because there is body horror there. There is a lot of that creepiness of people being taken over by something, which goes back at least as far as the invasion of the body snatchers. But in this case, it's not bodies necessarily that are being snatched, but bodies and minds that are being influenced to alter themselves and to turn these groups of human beings into a distributed network of one something. Whether it's a mind, whether it's a body, we don't know. And the people talking about it in their calm, seemingly rational way don't know either. This movie just blew my mind. It can be considered art house, it can be considered science fiction, it can be considered horror, it can be considered body horror. But Ian Haig has really created something unique here. And once you get used to the conceits of the way the video is manipulated, which is kind of low res and 20 years behind the state of the art as far as video manipulation of images is concerned, it's really interesting. At a certain stage, those distortions and the way that people are speaking about this becomes almost normal and almost acceptable. And that makes it wonderfully creepy. This movie stays with you because it does have that hypnosis of repetition, and it does have our curiosity piqued about what's going to happen next, and what the hell is this movie, and why there's suddenly commercials for technological devices inserted into the middle of the narrative. I really enjoyed this. It's science fiction, but not as we know it. It's a little hard to find. There are trailers for it online. I'm going to post a link that I've got to where you can find it. It's for those of us who really are comfortable with science fiction in the extreme. And I loved it for that. The second film I got for you is a little more prosaic. It's not really challenging in the same way that The Foaming Node is. It's a little piece of cinema from 1968 called The Blood Beast Terror, which had a number of other names in other markets. In the US, it was called The Vampire Beast Craves Blood. It was also known as Blood Beast from Hell and Death's Head Vampire. It was produced by Tony Tenser's Tygon Studios, and it was directed by a guy called Vernon Sewell, who did a lot of low-budget English cinema for as far back as the 1930s. In fact, this was one of his last movies. It starred Peter Cushing, Robert Fleming and Wanda Ventham, who people better know as being the mother of Benedict Cumberbatch. This was a difficult movie for them to get made because Tony Tenser had just made Witchfinder General with Vincent Price and had steered Tygon into horror. Originally, his companies made things like nudist camp movies in the late 50s and early 60s, and he went on to do some kind of pseudo documentaries about the swinging 60s and decides to do this one. He's got Peter Cushing locked in, and Peter Cushing has signed his contract. And the other star who is playing the mad scientist in this was going to be Basil Rathbone. And Basil Rathbone, who lived in California at the time, signed the contract. He was going to fly out to the UK in August. About 3 weeks before that happened, he died of a heart attack. so they didn't have a star 3 weeks out from the start of production. And this being a low-budget studio, they really didn't have the resources to delay filming. And so they got an English actor called Robert Fleming to take over. And Robert Fleming had very, very little time to prepare for the role or to even understand it. But they went on with it. Peter Cushing tried to help the production by rewriting his own lines and some of the lines for the other actors in his scenes, because the original script was and remains pretty ordinary. And later on, he has said that this is probably the worst movie he made in his career. I think at the time he may have forgotten he was in Star Wars. Plot of it is mad. It's the 19th century in the home counties of England, and there are a series of grisly murders in the countryside around London. The victims are all good-looking young men between the ages of 20 and 30, and I'm partly reading this off Wikipedia. And all of them has got their throats cut out and the blood drained from them. They do have a witness, but he's being driven insane by what he sees. And what he sees is something human-sized that rips the throats out of people, drains their blood, and flies away. It's not a traditional vampire. The inspector in charge of looking into this is Inspector Quinnell, played by Peter Cushing. And it's kind of interesting to see Peter Cushing playing a cop. It's not usually the kind of role he played in these sorts of movies. And he wasn't that keen on playing it either, because he wanted to steer away from the cliches of playing monster killers, which is pretty much what he did for that part of his career. He's got an assistant called Sergeant Allen, played by Glyn Edwards, who had done this role a lot and did a lot of subsequent roles of this type, and the two have a nice chemistry and play off each other wonderfully. The coachman who saw these murders starts ranting about a winged creature with huge eyes, and he gets taken off to an asylum. As Quinnell investigates, he finds out that the two latest victims are students of a renowned entomology professor, Dr. Carl Mellinger, played by Robert Fleming. And Mellinger has a whole bunch of students. He does lectures at night with slideshows. He lets his house be used by the students, who put on some plays that kind of resemble the story of Frankenstein. And even his alleged daughter, Claire, played by Wanda Bentham, takes a role in these student plays. Things are boring in the countryside, and any entertainment you can get is worthwhile. A naturalist called Brightwell turns up, and he has found some large death's head moth pupae on his explorations in the jungles of somewhere. Now, we see him exploring the jungles of somewhere at the start of the movie, and apart from cross-cutting to various stock footage of African animals, it's pretty obvious that it's somewhere in the home counties of England, and he and the two black men he is with are just paddling up some creek in the English home counties, which is amusing as hell to me. So Brightwell and a whole bunch of other young men are killed by this thing, and Quinnell starts trying to track down Mellinger. When Quinnell gets too close, Mellinger disappears and continues his weird experiments somewhere else. Now, here's where the spoilers come in, and to be honest with you, it's important to talk about the spoilers here. Claire, the daughter, played by Wanda Bentham, isn't a human being. She's a weird giant variant of a death's head moth, who, when she is sexually aroused in her human form, attacks her potential mate, bites them in the throat, and drinks their blood. What Mellinger is trying to do is grow a large male pupae of the death's head moth so that she has a mate. She doesn't seem to be able to wait until he can successfully do that. He does have an almost human-sized pupae, which he eventually starts trying to stimulate with static electricity, but things go west pretty fast, and Quinnell and his daughter, who he takes undercover as a holiday maker, start investigating. The daughter is drained of blood to try to make this pupae more human, and things end up pretty bloody weird at the end of this film. It is a mad piece of work, made on a pretty low budget, made partly on location, but partly on some sets, which are really small. In fact, the whole crew and cast complained about how small the sets were. And you can see it, the houses that we see the characters in are small, the laboratory is small, the morgue, and there is a morgue scene because after the murders in this kind of movie you always have morgue scenes. The morgue is pretty small too, it's about the size of a bedroom, and the morgue attendant's played by a music hall comedian called Roy Hull, who brings the movie into a totally different headspace. He's cracking jokes about the corpses and eating his dinner in the morgue and talking to the cops and talking to doctor and all that kind of thing. And the tone of this guy in the movie is totally different than everybody else in the movie. Everybody else is keeping a straight face and talking about this giant Were-Moth in a very serious way. But he came in for a day apparently. He just didn't have the tone right for it. And even though Peter Cushing encouraged him, and in fact gave him a few of the lines he uses for humorous effect, that humour doesn't blend well with the rest of the film, which itself isn't all that great. Like the foaming note, after a while, the weirdnesses in this film and the shortcomings of the film become hypnotic. You start wondering how small the next set you see in this movie is going to be, and how the director Vernon Sewell is going to try to shoot around the small size of these weird sets. And there are weird things like there are set decorations which transfer from one house to another that you'll see if you pay close attention to things. It's just a weird little horror film. And the moth creature itself is kind of odd. It's clearly somebody in a furry leotard with paper mache wings and a paper mache head with a couple of lights in it. With this kind of movie, more so even than in some of the Hammer and Amicus horror films, you lean into the low-budget aesthetic of it and just go with it. And Peter Cushing is pretty good playing the cop. It's a little bit of a different role from his usual vampire hunters and monster hunters, or indeed him playing Dr. Frankenstein. But even though he says it's one of the worst movies that he appeared in, he still gives full value in the film, and all credit to him for that. The Blood Beast Terror is one of those vulgar pleasures that we have in cinema, where the more you know about how messed up the creation of the film is, the more you can enjoy watching it. And there are a couple of roles which are played by actors who just aren't very good. William Wilde, who plays Brightwell, the guy who brings the pupae to Malinger, is really not very good at all. He's mugging all the way through his acting. And his character is annoying in an incel kind of way. The movie itself, I like. The special effects are minimal. And I think there is one stage where the moth creature is basically something made out of cardboard thrown in front of the camera. I kind of like it more than I should. And that in itself means that the movie gave me full value. It's a mad little film. And it's one you should definitely check out, particularly if you're a Peter Cushing completist, but also if you ever wonder what Benedict Cumberbatch's mum was doing before Benedict Cumberbatch was born. She was making this kind of movie and not doing too badly, though I think that there was a lot of meat left on the bone when it came to talking about the relationship between Malinger and this weird woman-moth hybrid that he is trying to find a mate for. I think there could have been some really weird subtext put into that, which the script just simply didn't do. So there's the two movies, incredibly different, but both incredibly watchable for very different reasons. An experimental film from 2018, a cheapo English horror film from 1968, but somehow in my mind they blend well as a double feature. So thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed this, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Take a look at some of the playlists of science fiction movies that I've talked about before. You can also support the channel by becoming a channel member or by becoming a patron at patreon.com/TerryTalksMovies. It's almost time for me to put out my monthly Spotify playlist of movie-related music or weird music I've found on the internet, and the channel members and Patreon subscribers get a link to that. So until next time, when I'm doing more weird stuff for the Sunday Monday video, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies, watch some experimental science fiction movies that will just blow your mind, and some really dumb and fun science fiction horror movies that have a budget of about 13 quid. And I'll catch you next time.